On this episode of Connected, we talk about the IoT devices. Will they lead to the rise of Skynet? What you can do to secure your data? And what really happens when you click agree on that EULA? Plus, CES 2016 preview. All this and more on Connected.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is Connected, Episode 2, Securely. Recorded November 23rd, 2015.
Hello and welcome to Connected, Everything IoT. My name is David Danto. I'm your host, and we're looking forward to talking about a lot of interesting things regarding IoT security on this show today. I have with me a couple of security experts and experts in the space that will hopefully give us some information as to how secure and unsecure everything is that we're playing with. So let me have them introduce themselves. Jason, why don't you start?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jason Harris. I'm the Managing Principal Consultant for Security in the Americas. So I've been working in the security industry for around about 15 years now. And certainly over the last 2 years, I've seen a massive increase in interconnected devices, what some people are calling Internet of Things. It is an area that's very interesting in terms of the risks it exposes us all to. So we're looking forward to a good conversation.
Thank you, Jason. Bradford?
My name's Bradford Ben. During my day job, I'm with Harman Professional, in charge of large network systems. In my nighttime after-hours role, I'm a card-carrying member of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I've been interested in securing my data and my company's data for about the past 20 years, including my previous stints as a network administrator.
Terrific, thank you. And finally, Phil?
Hi, my name is Phil Langer. I'm the president. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely.
Okay, just didn't see it come up on there. I'm sorry. So I'm the president of Show and Tell. We're a New York-based digital signage company. We operate and care for hundreds of video screens all over the world, including some of the large video displays in Times Square. And so, as you can imagine, we're very concerned about security and making sure that these powerful communication tools don't get misused and are treated properly and cared and fed well, from everything from content to operations to security. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that as the show goes on.
Terrific, Phil. Thanks very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Before we get into our conversation today, I'd actually like to take a look at a quick little clip from a movie I'm sure many of us have seen, and then that'll kind of spur us into talking about things. So hold on.
We thought it was a communications error, but now it looks like the virus.
Early warning in Alaska's down. What?
Signals from half our satellites are scrambled beyond recognition.
What about the missile silos, the subs? We've lost contact.
All access inquiries to your supervisor.
Let's pray to God this works.
Skynet defense system now activated.
Power failure? No. I don't know what it is.
Tony, what the hell is going on?
Daddy!
Hey, what are you doing here?
Daddy! Get away from it! Watch out!
We have to shut down Skynet. Where's the system core? Somewhere in this building?
Skynet, the virus has infected Skynet.
Skynet is the virus. It's the reason everything's falling apart.
Skynet has become self-aware. In 1 hour, it will initiate a massive nuclear attack on its enemy.
What enemy?
Us! Humans.
So that's a very interesting look at security and what's going on. Maybe perhaps a little bit paranoid, but then again, maybe not. We're hearing stories about self-driving cars being hacked and people's data going all over the place, and everybody clicking on user license agreements without reading the 57 pages that go before it. Who knows what we're giving away? So to give us a little perspective, Jason, let me go to you first. I know that you've got a lot of background in the security space. What's changed over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years where we were talking about security and we really weren't talking about it, at least not in the public consciousness before that?
Certainly. So I think the Terminator film is quite thought-provoking in terms of we're actually not that far away from that state. So 3, 4, 5 years ago, we pretty much relied on having a hardened perimeter that protected our organizations against external threats. Most of the internal threats were fairly minimal or were treated in that way, certainly. But obviously over the last, particularly 3 years, we've seen this explosion in interconnected devices. So the first wave really we saw were particularly mobile devices, smartphones, etc. But increasingly over the last 2 years, I've seen lots of organizations that when we go in and actually to carry out a vulnerability assessment or a penetration test of the organization, who say we only have, let's say, 10,000 devices, we find another 5,000, and they're often things like smart cameras, smart printers, smart devices of myriad of types of devices that either they don't know existed or certainly didn't know were IP connected and had the capability to be remotely controlled. And certainly now we're starting to see this wave of smart devices in the home. And you made a really good point earlier, which was what I was going to raise, which is who reads that 50-page EULA that you click on. You say, yeah, fine. So the biggest issue that I see with all this, a lot of the issue is that people are clicking on those links, are allowing access to those devices to unknown networks, unknown systems, who knows. And the same goes for users inside the businesses. And all of a sudden, where is your network? The kind of Skynet thing. All of a sudden you've got network links into another 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 networks, so you have an interesting view on security. Most of the high-profile hacks that we've seen have been through a smaller, weaker organization into the big corporates. And certainly the amount of information that's being gathered and utilized is just exponentially rising. So, somebody gave me a good example the other day. He said that, his intelligent thermostat that he has at home. So I wonder if it's actually collecting data. I don't know, because when I go to Google now and I click on and I do a search in Google, I miraculously get these pop-ups for, filters for air conditioning appear at my local Home Depot store. Now, how do they know that I've got air conditioning and maybe I need a new filter? So, we've also seen reputational damage caused by this. We're actually working with a big client over in on the West Coast where they were actually hit by somebody hacking into and changing their intelligent traffic sign. I won't say what it actually said, but it was pretty rude and it made the front page of the press. So we're actually seeing people utilizing it, exploiting it. The thing that worries me more, and I think worries most people, is that now intelligence agencies in general are quite happy to just ingest any data that they can get on anybody, because who knows, they might need it one day.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant thought, and I think it was one of the comedians who made a whole video that Facebook was really an invention of the CIA, so it knows everything that we're doing. Phil, why don't you comment on that a little bit, because I know in my past life I was responsible for a whole bunch of those signs in Times Square, and you're responsible for a lot more than I am. Is that really a risk for you in terms of reputational damage of an organization with one of these large signs, somebody putting up some content on there that really shouldn't be out in public?
Oh, sure. The fear is definitely the expectation always needs to be there that could happen. And it would, of course, be terrible. The larger the communication device is, the more power it wields, if you will. And so, reputational damage is something that we're very concerned about. It's a tricky it's the internet is something we live and die by because we can't do without it. We wouldn't be able to operate this industry if it wasn't there. And so, it's that conundrum between how much security and how much convenience do you allow with certain prudence to having the correct security so that you're protecting your clients and their reputations.
Well,
So,
I think Jason also made the point before that and Bradford or anybody, you guys can pick up on this. Security isn't what we thought it was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you either operated the system or it was secure and you couldn't get in. No connections, no firewalls, key bar the door, all the different strategies. I think we've learned, based on who's been hit with hacks, that border security doesn't work. And all those things that we were doing to prevent ourselves from operating equipment probably was the wrong way of approaching it. Now the systems themselves need to be smarter to know not to do something stupid. I mean, is that how, what do you guys think about that?
Well, I was going to say one of the biggest changes I've seen is literally walking into an environment and either being on their wireless network or on their wired network, and basically you're inside now and border security is gone. And now it comes down to access control lists and being able to get to things because, like you said, everything's connected. You can have people who tweet stuff that shows up on the big board. You have to worry about that for reputation damage. But to me, the bigger thing is coming in for a meeting, going into a conference room, plugging in a computer into the closest network jack, and poof, you're on the network. It's amazingly simple. There's also the other side, which me being paranoid is the open Wi-Fi that someone doesn't know about because someone put it at their desk to make their life easier. I'm wandering around looking for it. I pick up my handy-dandy iPhone. I see all the IP addresses and all the networks that are available, and I get in. I think the ultimate problem at the moment isn't the security systems. It's the security users who don't actually use it and end up letting the door be unlocked.
Yeah, certainly from our experience, we're seeing that most of the hacks and most of our clients, when we actually assess their environment, the biggest weakness, the biggest gap is in people and process, not so much in technology. So you see on the point there an easy point, which is open Wi-Fi or easy access to a network within a building via wireless or via wired. So if there was a good process in place that restricted that from happening and people were educated as to why that wasn't a good idea, we'd actually avoid a lot of these issues. What we're finding now, what we've found really is that we have to lead our clients and our users more towards protecting the data than the actual network and the environment. So the crown jewels is usually the data. In case of signage, it's not so much the data, it's obviously being able to manipulate the data that's put onto that signage. But certainly we're still working in the world where I think most users think about, okay, I've got a firewall, I've got a PC that's running AV, IT look after my security, I don't really need to worry about things. It's remarkably easy to convince, as we know, convince the user just to click yes to anything, including pop-up boxes, harvest credentials, gain privilege access. So the user is unfortunately definitely the weak spot usually.
Aren't we, though, talking about an era where the nature of what we do from a security standpoint needs to change? And I'll give two examples of this that I've heard casually in conversation. An AV consultant friend of mine was telling me about how he was building a large series of restaurants for a large organization, and all of their foodstuffs were stored in refrigerators and freezers in their restaurants. And these were all managed on the network using a central console, and anybody could hack into this console and set all the refrigerators down to stop refrigerating. And they would have millions of dollars of losses if that were to happen. So the refrigerators, it's not the prevention of getting to the refrigerator, getting to the console. It has to be the console that goes back and say, why do you want to turn off the refrigerators? I know that's a dumb thing to do. That should be something that's protected via some additional layer. Another example of that, and any of you guys can speak up, there's another example of that would be the idea that when we're talking about the self-driving car, we've already seen a story about how an internet-connected car was hacked into. On the Good Wife episode, I don't know if you guys watched that, a couple of weeks ago, they had an example of somebody who was in a self-driving car. Obviously, this was fictitious, which then, hit another passenger and crippled somebody. Well, shouldn't we be creating systems in that type of environment that prevent the hack? So how much is prevention and how much is intelligent programming is my question.
I'll answer that really. I think the challenge we have now is these internet-connected devices. Most of them are very much consumer grade, or they're aimed at low-cost market or as a value add. I mean, my friend was showing me the other day how he can control his fridge from his iPhone app. I said, that's awesome. You can control your fridge and your washing machine. Now, unfortunately, that's it's a value add to a client or to a consumer. The amount of security that's built into those is not really industrial grade. So we're opening up the world to all of these myriad of connection points into either your own personal world or through your personal world into the business world. And certainly it's almost like we need to time out and say, right, okay, if we're going to do this, we need to actually do it maturely and look at the security in the life cycle of the whole of the program, the application, the data, how it's used, etc. That's not happening. I don't see that happening. I just see people rushing out. Wouldn't it be great to control my washing machine from the internet? I'll just sign that EULA and move on. The fact that same phone is almost certainly their business phone that also has access to sensitive data, kind of doesn't even cross the user's mind. And certainly, the washing machine manufacturer, no, he doesn't care about that either.
Guys, any other thoughts?
I was going to say, I think that's a very valid point. There's always my first question, which is, why do I need an IP-controlled washing machine, toaster, or refrigerator? I understand the thermostat a little bit more because I'll admit I use it. I leave home and I forget to turn down the thermostat before I go on vacation. I can go online. But then comes the other thing of I'm a nerd and I've set up firewalls and I've set up access control lists on my switches, and I'll hold up for the camera. I set up the 2 iPhones, one that'll get me fired, one that'll get me divorced. Let you guys pick which one's which. But the whole separation of work phone and personal phone so that, there is no security breach there that's likely, and I take my security pretty seriously. And
Bradford, let me pause you there for a second, and I want you to answer this because I want to come back to you. I know it's least common denominator, I know it's consumerization, but when I left financial services and went into work for a non-financial services company, all of a sudden, hey, I didn't need to carry 2 devices anymore. I was still finding myself emailing a file from my work PC to my home PC before I realized, they're on the same network. I can just transfer now. It's so much easier that way. That's why I think consumers do that and avoid that separation, is because of how hard traditional IT has made it to do their job. Organizations will now say, no, you're not allowed to use any public cloud file sharing services, and instead of taking the no, people whip out one of those iPhones that you showed, and they go to Box or Dropbox or anything else because the no is the wrong answer. The right answer would have been, partnering as an IT organization, saying, all right, I understand what you need to do. Here's the approved way to do it. Let's make it easy for you. But, IT's been an organization of no for years.
100% agree with you. IT's favorite answer is no, because their entire job performance is based on system uptime. So you're going to do everything you can to keep your system uptime as high as possible. This is where it comes down to training the users and explaining to the users why this is important. Yes, I'm one of those weird nerds that reads the EULA and goes, I don't want to put my pictures up on Flickr, or I don't want to put them up on Google because I want to own the rights to my pictures, so I pay for my own hosting. Same thing with the email, same thing with other things. But part of it is I think that IT has a responsibility, and those of us who know more about it have a responsibility to explain why these practices are important, to explain if it's free, you're probably the product, to explain how ad tracking goes in and why, you don't want to check remember password. Even though it's easy, it's not secure. And I think that's the trade-off we're always fighting, is which is easy, which is secure. And the two can it's very hard to make the two coexist, but with a little bit of thought, it can be done that way. To be honest, looking at having this iPhone that has AirWatch security on it and various keys and certificates is a lot harder than having my personal cell phone that still has a couple certificates on it for VPN, but it's set up very differently because the company says you shouldn't use Dropbox because of the EULA, you shouldn't use this service, here use our service instead. But they've done a very poor job of explaining that to people here's our service that you should use. You should use transfer dot blah, 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 because we pay for that to transfer the services. And you can store files up there. But most companies, there's a problem between the users and the IT department, and I think is the root of the vast majority of the security things.
We're starting to see a number of organizations delve into bimodal IT, delve into the IT organization that maintains the central core, and then a whole separate organization within the lines of business or business units that are there to get things done, that don't want to have to make themselves subject to those rules because they see those rules as being too restrictive or too arcane. They want to be a little bit more flexible based on what's going on in the market, and that bimodal is a result of all of this.
I agree with that. And I was going to say the other thing I see as a problem is users are just saying, I need to have access to my data, not what task are they trying to accomplish. And if they're saying I'm trying to securely share a file with one of our vendors, that's a completely different answer than I need to send a large file securely to a vendor. And I think that's one of the things that bimodal IT is getting better at. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that as a security consultant, I've seen a big shift over the last 2 years in who my clients are. So my clients now are probably about 50% of the actual real client is not IT. It's a business person within IT or IT related, but actually part of IT group. So they're the people that we're doing lots of work with on things like cloud security, and yeah, we're going to go cloud anyway. We've already gone cloud. Maybe now's the time to secure it. So certainly we've seen that power shift, and certainly we've seen security budget spend, actually who holds the budget, shift from specifically with IT security to, well, you can have your renewals as a budget, but everything else has to be business driven.
Phil, are you seeing a lot more of this bimodal nature as well amongst your clients and customers?
Not so much. Yeah, I'm familiar with it. It's a fascinating discussion, and to a certain extent, it's a bit over my head from a security standpoint, but I am familiar with some of the procedures that are happening. I can tell you as a business owner, I get very concerned about security as it makes our flexibility a bit cumbersome. So in a way, it's almost like if I were to allow the people who maintain the city streets to designate what hours we can drive on the streets, well, we'd probably have much reduced ability to drive on those streets. So we can't necessarily let those folks just call the shots. We have to have a good balance between listening to their expert advice about how to properly maintain those streets, or in this case, the metaphor, our network systems. But also, we have to maintain this flexibility that allows us to be competitive. Like we're a small company, and we have to compete against some very large companies who have larger and more cumbersome security protocol, legal restrictions that you mentioned before. And so we have to, one, be clever about that, but also maybe sometimes more manual about our file transfers and so forth, so that we know that we're being prudent, we're being secure, but we're maybe not necessarily, using multiple secure servers all over the world. Maybe we use a sneaker net, and it could be just as secure in those sort of sense. So, it might be a low-tech answer to solve that security issue, but still maintaining security. I mean, I don't want to downplay the importance of that.
No, it makes perfect sense. That's like that old parable about, do we invent the NASA space pen or do we just use a pencil? I'm totally on board with that. We haven't really talked as a group very much about the concept of the security of our own personal data, especially in the world of the Internet of Things, where there are so many sensors out there. I know one of you mentioned, and I certainly have experienced, that I've gone shopping on an Internet website, and I've priced out some things that I wasn't quite ready to buy yet, but I looked at them and I looked at some of the reports on them, and then my next web search, all of a sudden the pop-up boxes were for that device that I was looking for. When we're using our mobile phones, when we're using tablets, when we're accepting these end-user license agreements, is there anybody out there looking out for the security of our data?
I just jumped in as a regular consumer guy. That bugs the heck out of me what you just mentioned, that scenario, and I think it is becoming more mainstream about ad blockers and a product that I use a lot called Ghostery, which is a real a great product for browsers that allows the blocking of those cookies and tracking mechanisms. And it literally is a little watchdog pop-up. Anybody can use it. It's free to install in any browser, and it's a great tool to educate me about what's of my information is being watched.
We don't want to advocate just one product. There are any number of products.
There's a lot of great products, but something that educates the user, that allows you to know what's being listened to and what's being watched, to really make that more transparent, is becoming more mainstream, that more people can use and understand what's going on. I really advocate for that.
And I will say, one of the things that's been interesting to me, just from a knowledge and trying to learn more instance, has been the whole ad network and how ad tracking works. And yes, I'm using anonymizers and blockers of cookies and things like that, but the fact that it's not the websites talking to each other directly, it's the ad servers talking to you. So if you were at Amazon, or you were at Frugal, or you were at Alibaba, and it says, oh, you were looking at this widget, your ad tracker now knows you're looking at that widget. So now your next ad server, whether it be through Google or DoubleClicks or whoever, will then push those things as well. It's not the website itself. It's an entire back network of just ad tracking that I think people aren't aware of. That's how you're the product. And it actually becomes a double-edged sword, in my opinion. We don't want to pay subscription fees for online content, but we don't want to have the ads that pay for online content. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting that I've lived in two countries with very strong privacy laws, data protection laws, so the UK and Australia, and moving to the US was an enlightening experience for me. That very quickly, I think within my first 2 weeks, I realized that actually in the US, pretty much can assume that you have no rights to privacy of your data, because once you give it to one company, there's actually nothing stopping them from sharing that around. And of course, we're seeing this commercial gain from sharing data. So that's something that's I can see different states are starting to clamp down on, but the data's already out there. There's so much of it out in the wild, and it's on every one of these systems. And of course, as an ethical hacker, I never target the big boy. I always target a little tiny company that has a link to the other company, or let's target somebody who I know has a lot of data. So somebody targeting those ad companies, or that backbone, as you call it, Brad. That's where I can guarantee people are already either hacked them already or are targeting them because of the amount of consolidated data that they have.
All right, so then we've talked about protecting reputational risk and protecting firms' large data, and we've talked about how there really isn't any privacy, certainly in the U.S., but that we're not aware of the privacy, certainly 2, 3, 4 clicks past that, as to who our license agreements are letting our third parties connect with. We haven't really talked at all about nefarious uses of data in hacking and interpreting, and I don't mean just shutting a guy's website down. I mean, we've got situations now where blood pressure monitors and blood glucose monitors, and both in hospital networks and consumers are working from sensors, again, on the Internet of Things, over to devices. Who's to say that, I don't take a piece of medicine or medicate, or a doctor prescribe a piece of medicine based on incorrect data that's been hacked into from sensors that we're lost, out of control, not in security. Is that something we really need to? We're back to Skynet again. Is that something we really need to start protecting against? Or are we just living in too naive a space right now?
No, we do, Dave, and that's an area that is I'm seeing a huge growth on with our clients in that space. There's so many interconnected and IP connected medical devices and medical systems that data that's in those systems is life or death information. So if you administer penicillin to a patient who's had their record hacked that says do not administer penicillin because they're allergic, that's life or death. Same thing with all these interconnected devices that gathering, let's say, blood work and immediately sending that blood work to a clinician's iPad. That's not science fiction. That's widespread, and we're only just starting to see those organisations that actually have that in place catching up with that. Actually, probably maybe we should actually assess the security of that, and maybe we should start spending the money to catch up. Because they're really, it's been very driven by the need to put something in quickly, and then don't worry, we'll catch up with security later. So yeah, it's a real risk. It's something that is growing and will only continue to grow. It seems very simple for everyone. Hey, great, we can feed this data everywhere now. We're seeing hospitals feeding that data in real time, backs and forwards to paramedics in the field. So, the ramifications of if you manipulate that data or you actually intercept it or do something with it or delete that data is significant. I think you touched on the point just now where you were saying about nefarious use. Absolutely. We've seen the last 2 years particularly, the shift has gone from targeting credit card data to targeting personally identifiable information, because if you can claim somebody's identity and create fraud in that identity, you can make a lot more money. And all of that is funded by organized crime, for sure.
And I do think that there, as Jason said, he has very valid points of there's very limited handshakes and people are just doing their get it to work as fast as possible. But I think there's a big fear in the corporate market for having a third party review their products and check for security leaks and look for problems, because there are a lot of people who will volunteer their times or wanting to be a white hat instead of a black hat and say, oh, look, if you do this, here are all the problems that come out of it. And a lot of the companies are very hesitant to do that because they don't want to share their data and risk a breach. They'd rather just hide it all and hope for the best. And I think that's a big miss that a lot of people are missing. I also think a lot of companies aren't even doing the basics, like, for instance, encrypting your email. How easy is it to make it that you can't forward an email without the encrypted data? But most doctors' offices or financial offices don't even think about encrypting email. They just send you stuff and go to a secure website and hope for the best. There's all these simple practices, I think, that are just getting us used to the idea of security that we're all missing.
Yeah, if I would just add one other quick thing to that, in terms of the more critical, as history shows us, the more critical systems we become reliant upon, the more important it is to have a plan B and a plan C. If we look at aviation and medical, technologies, there's always a backup to fall back on in case the new technology fails. And this is going to be true with network security. And that's really just an opportunity for us as service providers to help foster the education of those backup systems and the use and the implementation of those.
So as a last point, guys, I have to say that if I'm tuning into this webcast to get a nice, comfortable feeling about where everything is going, I ain't got it. I'm more scared than anything else. Are we going to need a tipping point? Is there going to be some catastrophe or some large event that will finally make us take the concept of security of the Internet and Internet of Things seriously?
I certainly hope it doesn't come to that. I am seeing that the industry, though, certainly the commercial side of the industry I think they're at that tipping point now. So we've seen an influx of requests to assess really those kind of roadside systems, those interconnected devices that have traditionally not had as much security, but now there's that realization that actually now we need to look at the security of those extended networks. And I'm starting to see as well that at least state-based legislation is driving some of that activity. So I'm hoping that the tipping point is there now. We're starting to go down the path of assessing and remediating those environments that we traditionally haven't done. Things like secure SCADA systems where that's handshake and communication is encrypted, they're starting to be pushed out as well. So let's just hope we don't see one of those horror stories like something really bad happens to be the tipping point. I think the industry is at that point now and just needs a bit of a nudge.
And I do think the tipping point has already started for some industries. You look at the Sony Pictures hack and how much that's affected that industry with security. And in the entertainment industry, it's gotten a lot more solid as to how the information's secured, the networks being separated from each other, and it being more difficult to get from network A to network B. But I think part of it is us as consumers have to decide it's that tipping point. I reached the tipping point on my own a couple of months ago when I was just sick and tired of every little website knowing, hey, I just looked for, this new Lego toy and every website having it. So I started securing my data. I think it's up to the people to push that along. And as Jason said, you living in the States versus living overseas and the way that security data is there, I think is a huge eye opener for people, is to see how other people treat your data much more respectfully than I think it's done here in the States.
Yeah, I would agree. Just a quick period on the end of that sentence is that, it's not a cause to be hysterical or totally scared, but just more to be responsible and smart about your decisions. Instead of a tipping point, I kind of see it like a saw blade. There'll be little, there'll be little failures and there'll be little successes, and then there'll be little failures and then little successes. But overall, the net is we're going to get stronger and stronger and smarter and smarter.
So Skynet's not going to be here next week?
Oh, Skynet's already here.
Okay.
It's called Google.
Gentlemen, briefly on that note, or maybe not now on that note, let me ask you each one more time. I'll thank you. And how do people get in touch with you if they want to? Jason?
Just reach out to me on Jason Harris, jason.harris@us.didata.com.
Great. Bradford?
On bradfordben.com, or just go to the Skynet, Google, and search for Bradford Ben or at Bradford Ben on the Twitters.
Terrific. And Phil, Show and Tell?
Showandtell.com, showandtell.com, and I'm just Phil at showandtell.com.
Terrific. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a great conversation. Bear with me for 1 second because we just have a couple more clips that we want to show before we say goodbye for this episode. As many of you know, I'm involved with the CES show that's coming up the second week of January. We're a couple of trade shows that take place that aren't necessarily as publicized as CES, and I was just at one last week and did just a few segments of video recording to give you a sense of what some of the new IoT products are that are coming out. So there's just a taster, just 3 of them. Take a look at these and we'll get back to you in a moment.
I'm Colt Stanner from Basis. We're an Intel company. What's different about our product as compared to the rest of the competitors out there is that we really make a product that's made for wearing 24 hours a day. We incorporate a number of sensors, including an optical heart rate sensor, into a slim product that is really easy to wear all day and all night. The night piece is actually really important, as we are one of the few companies out there that can actually deliver insights about your sleep that include light, deep, and REM sleep. Light being the transition between deep and REM, as deep is really showing you your body rejuvenation, and REM showing your mind rejuvenation, both of which incredibly important to making sure that you have the best day possible after your sleep.
How do people find out about it? Where do they go?
Come to mybasis.com.
Thanks.
All right, so I'm Ben Jacobs, co-founder and CEO of Whistle. And we're here to talk about our latest product. This is the Whistle GPS Pet Tracker. It's a location and activity monitor for your dog and your cat. But if your dog's to run away, you can know right away and get a text If they're with a dog walker, then great, you can make sure they get home safely, but if they got out of that open window or that open door, you can make sure to find them wherever they are. The product's available now. You can find us at whistle.com. That's WHISTLE.com, just whistle.com. And it's $79 with a small monthly fee.
Terrific.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Ready to go. So this is the Roost Smart Battery. It's a battery that transforms a smoke detector into a smart smoke detector. And it's quite unique. It's got two pieces. It has a microprocessor and a Wi-Fi chip in the wireless module. There's two lithium batteries and a transducer sensor in the top half. This is recyclable after 5 years. Snaps together. The way that it works is that you download the Roost app on your smartphone, connect this battery to your home Wi-Fi, and then place the battery in an existing smoke alarm, push the test button, and you get an alert on your smartphone whenever the smoke alarm goes off. It's available today at Roost site, GetRoost.com, Amazon, as well as Home Depot. And from a standpoint of, it's available now. It's doing great. We just started shipping it actually 2 weeks ago, so ready to go.
Fascinating stuff, and you should look forward to seeing some more of that, a lot more of that actually, when I'm at the CES show in January. That'll be our next episode right after the start of the new year. So thank you very much for joining us and my panel of experts. That's it for this episode of Connected Everything IoT. I'm David Danto. Wish you the best of everything till the next time. Take care.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.